Namaste, Jai Shri Ram. Welcome back to my show Satat Swadharma. I am very excited, elated to invite today's dynamic speaker that's about to be live with me on Bharat TV. This is your host and your dost RJ Megha on my show Satat Swadharma. Thank you for all your blessings and love on all my podcast and live shows and interviews so far. I hope the current guest again amazes you like the others, and he has an amazing background to offer to us. His introduction was something I had to cut short because of his academic achievements, intellectual abilities, and his dharmic as well as patriotic love towards our country, our very own Bharat. Let me quickly introduce Sri Pramod Kumar ji to you. He is currently an assistant professor at Amrita Darshanam for spiritual studies, Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham in Tamil Nadu. He graduated from IIT-Madras with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering. He was the founder member of Vivekanand Study Circle at IIT-Madras. He started his career with TCS Hyderabad, which he left shortly to pursue his interest in Bharat culture and spirituality. He served as the national coordinator of International Forum for Indian History between 2001 and 2003. He is a recipient of Yuva Shakti Youth Achievers Award in 2005 for his contribution to spreading awareness of Bharat's rich cultural heritage. He is currently involved in the implementation of the National Education Policy, which is also known as NEP 2020, and National Curriculum Framework for School Education in the domain of Indian knowledge systems. He serves as a senior consultant for NCERT and a National Syllabus and Textbook Material Committee. I am excited but also equally elated for this opportunity to speak with Sri Pramodji live on Bharat TV. Welcome, Pramodji, to our show.
Namaste, Meghaji. Thank you for inviting me to your show.
Thank you for your time this morning. I am
Wonderful. How are
quickly,
you?
I'm sorry,
I just asked, how are you?
I am doing amazing. How are you?
I am fine. Thank you.
We chose a very interesting topic, Pramodji. By the way, your introduction is fabulous. I am out of words, short of words for all the achievements you have so far, Pramodji, really.
Very kind of you, Meghaji. Thank you.
Um, we're going to start talking about the topic we chose for today, which is how can Hindu contribute to Hindu Renaissance? What do we mean by this topic? Can we dive deep into that?
Definitely. So, see, this year on 22nd January 2024, the Ram Mandir was inaugurated, as we all know, after a 495 years of civilizational struggle, right? So, this was a watershed moment for Hindu civilization. And it shows our resilience, our ability not to give up in the face of extreme hardships that our ancestors faced, in more than a millennium. So the reclamation of the Ram Mandir shows that our civilization's consciousness, its religious consciousness, has awakened, and this is visible at a public level, at a political level, in the kind of decisions that the Hindus are taking collectively today. However, at the individual level, I still feel that the ownership for Hindu revival, for Hindu consciousness to be revived, and for Hindu renaissance to happen, the ownership has to spread out into each and every individual's life. So it is that ownership of Hindu Renaissance from individual level that we want to talk about in this discussion that we are having. And let me elaborate a little more. For example, the rise of social media that we see, Right? Social media has helped us to correct a lot of distorted narratives which we used to find about Hinduism in the mainstream media. So a lot of Hindus have come on the social media, have become very vocal, very active in countering these distortions. So I find two types of very active Hindus today. One is the activist Hindu who is very active on social media, who counters these distortions. But many of them, or some of them, I find are not rooted in the Hindu lifestyle or in the Hindu values, which they are trying to defend. Sometimes their understanding of Hindu civilization, Hindu religion, philosophy, spirituality is wanting. The other side I find are people who are living the Hindu cultural life, the Hindu spiritual life, but they are completely ignorant of the social and the cultural environment and what is happening around us. So, though they are living the values, they don't feel the need to speak out or to be vocal about it or to defend it against the distortions that are happening. And those who are defending against the distortions seem to be lacking sometimes in the depth or in the foundation. So, the ideal Hindu Renaissance man, that if you could define, is a person who would have a balance of both. We're trying to bridge this gap. If the activist could also become knowledgeable about, the foundations and the foundational values, the civilizational values that he is fighting for intellectually, which he is defending. And similarly, the pious Hindu, the devout Hindu who's living the cultural values, would also become aware of the challenges that Hindu society faces today. As this gap gets bridged, we will see an explosion, so to say, a kind of renaissance happening in Hindu society. So this is what we are looking at. This is the ideal situation or the future that we want to unfold in Hindu society.
That was very beautifully, but elaborately and well explained with examples, Pramodji. I think our youth and audience is going to definitely relate with you because I love your example of the activist and the non-extremist. Um, could you also elaborate on how can our non-extremist at least come midway and meet us somewhere?
Right. So, in private discussions with the non-extremists, as you call them, right, is I find that they're kind of diffident to take a public stand. They're living this life, they're living the Hindu life, but there seems to be a fear of taking a public stand that they would be branded as a communal person, or that they would be identified with a narrow religious identity, and they have that hesitation to speak out, right? So what we have to like educate them, make them aware that there cannot be dharma without the dharmi, right? If this dharma has to survive, then the dharmis have to be there, and they have to be very proactive. They have to know what we call in Sanskrit Shatru Bodha. Right? What are the challenges? Who is the enemy? Unless you are aware of it, right? Your values cannot exist in a vacuum. Your values are supported by a society, and when that society is facing a challenge, it becomes everybody's responsibility to respond to that challenge. Every individual's responsibility to respond to that challenge. So Hindus have been affected by this syndrome that I call Satyameva Jayate syndrome, right? Which says that the truth will always triumph, and therefore I don't have to do anything about it. There will be always an avatar Purush who will come and save all of us, right? In every age, whenever there is a crisis, there will be a great leader like Shivaji who will be born, and it will be their responsibility to take care of these challenges. I don't have to do anything. So this is a wrong understanding. We have to understand that Shivaji Maharaj, if he had appeared at a time when Hindu civilization was facing perhaps one of its greatest challenges, it happened because of the prayers of millions of Hindus who wanted that kind of a response to happen. Right? And he was able to be successful because at the grassroots he found great support from each and every Hindu in the Maratha kingdom who looked up to him for that leadership. So therefore, to the non-extremists, we would say that own up this society and this civilization and be aware of the challenges that it is facing and at least speak out. We are not asking you to come to the streets and say get involved in street fights, right? But that would be one extreme level. But at least whatever is your knowledge of Hinduism, right? You should be able to express that knowledge, communicate that knowledge in such a way that the wrong narratives which have been built about our civilization and about our religion are corrected in the public space. This much responsibility, I think, the non-extremists should take.
If we even get 10% of people to understand and meet what you just explained, I think we will achieve a lot by this podcast today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes.
We will dive deeper into the importance of Indian languages and literature in understanding our Hinduism.
Great. So this is a very critical aspect that you have raised, Meghaji. So what I find with Hindus today is when it comes to mass media today, for example, movies or TV channels, etc., we do still preserve our linguistic identities, whether we are Telugu people, whether we are Kannadigas, whether we are Maharashtrians, etc. So you find these regional movies still being popular. We are seeing, for example, with this Telugu movie that has become very popular, which I am referring to. So, when it comes to mass media, the importance of our regional languages or their having a distinct identity seems to be well appreciated or understood, or possibly because there is a commercial interest involved there, or if there is a political interest involved, then people are willing to defend their linguistic identities and their languages. But when it comes again to their individual life or to their family life, I find that our Indian languages are very much in danger. And here, it is very important to recognize that language is the medium through which culture, through religion, spirituality, philosophy is communicated. So, without that medium being there, then we will lose the framework of the culture, religion, and spirituality also, right? So, therefore, communicating in our languages is extremely important, especially to the younger generation, to our children. So I find that in private conversations, in families, in social circles today, very easily we are shifting to English. For example, how many new books have been published in Indian languages which are read in our family and social circles? I find it, very, very meager. In fact, when I ask my students, how many of you have read a book in your mother tongue in the last 1 month or 3 months or 6 months? I hardly get any responses from the students, right? So this is, the danger. This is the risk or the challenge, one of the challenges that we have to recognize. The reason being, as I was saying, that many of these concepts, Hindu concepts, are very spontaneously or naturally internalized in Indian languages. Concepts like dharma, etc., don't require an elaborate amount of teaching when you are in fact communicating in the Indian languages. If you're born and brought up in a family where you are constantly conversing in Indian languages and you're using these terms in everyday life, it becomes part of your worldview. It becomes part of your personality. It becomes part of your thinking, right? So this is not happening. So today, that is why there are scholars who have had to bring this to limelight through books by explaining some of these concepts cannot be translated into foreign languages, and it leads to distortions. And this is where wrong narratives are, in fact, being encouraged or created because we are constantly shifting from Indian knowledge systems to a colonizer's knowledge systems when we are shifting to their language. So, this is something that all Hindus have to recognize and ensure that in their individual family and social circles, Indian languages are reclaimed. In this space, the importance which the Indian languages had should be brought back through conversations, through literature.
Very well said. I am going to go a little bit in your personal life. Within while you were explaining your introduction, I read you have given up your career with TCS, Tata Consulting Services, and you transitioned for your dharmic nature or your dharmic kartavya, which was teaching to students right now, and you're teaching them Sanskrit as well as
Uh,
spiritual.
Indian culture, heritage, along with Sanskrit. Yes.
Okay. So, did you ever fear that? What about your career? What about your future? Did that thought come into your mind?
Yes. So a little bit, I'll have to go into that journey because you're asking that question. So I got into IIT because it was the greatest challenge that was placed in front of me at the time. When we grow up as kids, we are told that the JEE is the toughest exam in India, and that if you crack it, your life is set. Right?
Right?
You can go to the US, you can do your MS there, you'll be placed in the world's top companies, and this is the path that is put in front of every bright Indian kid. But when I got into IIT, it was a culture shock, particularly because I came from a conservative family. And the kind of culture that I witnessed in the hostels or in the public spaces at IIT was new to me in the sense that I was not exposed to that. And this led to a lot of thinking on my part. Right? It was a kind of a existential, dilemma that I was having between my own personal life and the values that I had lived, and what I was seeing with the youngsters, the direction in which they were going. So it was at this very critical juncture in my life that I got exposed to spiritual literature, particularly Vivekananda literature, through this forum called the Vivekananda Study Circle at IIT-Madras, which continues to be, function even today, and it introduces whole new generations of students to our philosophical and spiritual literature. Over the period of 4 years, I was interacting with the monks of the Ramakrishna order, with the monks of the Ramakrishna mission, and this was my systematic exposure to, Hinduism, so to say, and to scriptures like the Gita, the Upanishads, the Vedas, and all these scriptures in those 4 years in the weekly classes that used to be held. We had a good systematic. It would not be a very thorough study, but it was a foundational study that I had. This was what laid my foundation in Hinduism, and this is what brought this aspiration, very strongly to me, that I could not visualize myself for the next, say, 20 years of my life, or for the rest of my life, being only, say, a mechanical engineer or a computer science engineer or working for a software company. And I felt that my calling was different, that I had to do something which would, one, allow me to, discover my own deeper self, self-actualization, in perhaps in Maslow's terms, but in terms of our Purusharthas, my Dharma and my Swadharma and my pursuit of moksha, I did not want to give up in pursuit of, say, materialistic progress. And therefore, I started looking for a domain which would help me, let's say, be productive for society, also do something which would be, useful for Hindu society also, and yet at the same time that would give me my time, etc., to pursue my personal interests in Hinduism. So I felt that academics would be the best option to do this, because by studying, going deeper into Hindu history, into Hindu philosophy, into culture and spirituality, it will help me gain this knowledge. And by communicating this knowledge to future generations of students, perhaps I would be doing the best service to Hindu Dharma. So this is how I kind of took a deviation or broke away from my IIT background and the career and came into this line of.
How old were you when you made that decision?
So I would be around 2021 when I made the decision.
Wow. I want to emphasize one thing. We are always taught, especially with Bharat or US or what, that your spiritual journey, your dharmic journey starts when you become old. When you're in your 60s, 70s is when you want to sit with Mala and start the jap. At 21, what was the inspiration for this
Right.
decision?
Right. So age is never a factor for pursuing spirituality. Right. Spirituality, in fact, in our tradition, we say spirituality is not a post-retirement plan. This is a very common misunderstanding that has developed in our society, that you have to first pursue your materialistic wealth and progress and enjoy your life, and only then, when you come to the retirement stage, then you can give a thought to the higher or the deeper goals of life. But the traditional view has always been a very integral view. Both have to go hand in glove with each other, right? One should not be at the cost of the other. That balance our ancestors always had. In fact, in that Sanskrit dictum that says "Ati sarvatra varjayet," that extremes are to be avoided in all aspects of life. One should always find a middle path, the golden mean has to be found, right? So we recognize that all the four purusharthas are important. Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha are all important. But Dharma is always the foundation And without that foundation, Artha, Kama, and Moksha will not happen. And therefore, this awareness which was there in our tradition, in our history, has somewhere been lost because of the modern education system. So when through my exposure to the scriptures, this consciousness essentially came back, right? So that foundation in Dharma is what I was trying to focus on. And then I thought that Artha, Kama, and Moksha will, naturally follow as a consequence.
It's amazing how you gave that a thought and you actually executed everything with academic achievements like we're seeing about you, with a background of extensive knowledge but also a support to the education system where you're also going to leave the impact that you want to leave the impact. So I will emphasize on this point, your dharma focus has not taken you away from your artha, kama, and moksha. In fact, it is aligning that for you. I do want the
Correct.
viewers and listeners to pay very careful attention to the statement that you've made. Um, so my aligning question that you just brought up, you said about education system. Um, what is the education system currently teaching, and what is it not teaching, and what do we need to do to complement that at our homes?
Right. So, in fact, in the previous question, when we talked about languages, Meghaji, I wanted to highlight this that we have to remember that the intellectual downfall or the emasculation of Hindu civilization, when did that start? It started in 1835 with Lord Macaulay's famous minute, right? Uh, where he replaced Indian languages in the schools with English as the medium of instruction. So it is with the change of this medium of instruction to English that our intellectual downfall also began, right? So, in fact, so that is where the education system in India moved away from its traditional routing that it had. Right? It should have been perhaps resuscitated in 1947 after independence. But unfortunately, we did not have that kind of visionary leadership which understood that it was time for us to not only politically regain independence, but in terms of intellectual, cultural, religious, and spiritual moorings also, we had to decolonize and reclaim all these spaces. So, unfortunately, what has happened is that in almost 77 years after independence, we are still struggling with this decolonization process, particularly in the education system. Right? So we are still continuing with a system which was essentially set up by Macaulay and the British administrators to create what he called, interpreters who would be Indians in appearance, in blood and skin color, but who would be anglicized in their intellect, in their taste and culture. So till date, in fact, the education system continues to do that because it does not systematically allow through the mainstream education system our students to learn about the foundations of our culture, of our religion, of our philosophy and spirituality. So this is where, in fact, for the first time, I feel that through the new education policy, the National Education Policy 2020, and the National Curriculum Framework, which has been created perhaps for the first time after independence, a very solid attempt is being made to integrate our civilizational consciousness, our heritage, and Indian knowledge systems into the education system to fill this lacuna. And this will, have very long repercussions if it is done properly for future generations.
You have brought up a very, very big point here. I
Right.
can do a whole series of 3 hours with you just on
Absolutely.
NEP as well as
Yeah,
your
I agree.
contribution to NCERT. Can we commit to our audience that we will come back to this greater topic with impacts?
Sure, definitely. We will. We should.
Thank you, Pramodji. I appreciate that. We will come back to our current topic today, as much as I want to diverge already. What is current threats to our Hindu way of life, and how do we recognize that, and how do we respond to that?
Okay. So, one threat we have already seen with the language. Right? So, the second threat is, of course, demography. And this is widely discussed. We are all aware of it. But the solutions to it, the brainstorming for it, perhaps more brainstorming has to happen on how to deal with this demographic challenge. And we should not go into simply very superficial kind of solutions that are being put into the public space. The population has to be countered with, counter population growth from our side. I think we should go deeper, right? We should look at how our ancestors also responded to this challenge. For example, even during the freedom struggle, right? Hindu leadership was very strong, right? You had Swami Dayananda of Arya Samaj, you had Swami Vivekananda going to the West and taking the message of Hinduism to the West. So that aggressive ownership of Hindu heritage, unfortunately, that has come down in the Hindu leadership today. So while there are, as I said, spiritual leaders who are rooted in our religion and philosophy, but this recognition of the demographic threat and what has to be done at the grassroots level to counter that threat, to essentially to take our dharma to all these peoples of say other religions, right, who've not been exposed to this thought. So you have two opposing kind of worldviews here. One that is dependent on the monotheistic worldview with the one God, one prophet, one book kind of a model. And you have Hinduism, which is so diverse, so mind-boggling in its diversity, and which does not impose a particular point of view, but which allows you to explore and in a very rational way through a very thinking a mind that is required to, in fact, do the self-discovery, to do the discovery of the deeper reality of the universe. And it is not through dogma that it happens. It is a process of discovery, very natural process of discovery that happens. In fact, a large population of the world today is not exposed to this thought. Therefore, we need Hindu leadership which can take Hindu consciousness, which can take Hindu, religion, spirituality to the world, to the other, hostile philosophies, theologies, which are posing a threat to us. It is only by taking ownership and being aggressive in this that we'll be able to counter that threat. So I'm essentially talking about the demographic threat also involves religious conversions today, right? So you have rampant conversions happening from the other religions. They're eating into our numbers, but we don't have the counter happening. Right? We don't have conversions into Hinduism happening at an equal pace. And I'm not talking about again, induced conversions where you induce a person, where you go fishing in troubled waters. You find somebody has a personal problem or a family problem, and therefore you offer money to him, as these hostile religions are doing to us, right? They're always fishing in troubled waters. They're always looking at weak links in our civilization, in our society, and they're exploiting those cracks. They're exploiting those weak links. They're exploiting conflicts in our society, convert people by giving them inducements, financial or career wise, or by offering them emotional support, right? So from our side, one is we have to create a support structure, right? A saver, kind of a structure which reduces this dependence of our masses for that support to look towards hostile elements. Second is the knowledge aspect. See, whenever we talk of Hindu Renaissance, one thing that I want our listeners to always appreciate is that we are a knowledge civilization, right? It is a Jnana Parampara. It is a Bharatiya Jnana Parampara. It is a Hindu Jnana Parampara, right? So here the knowledge is very, very important. Right? It's not just in the superficial aspects of our appearance, or just in our clothes, in our dress habits, or in our eating habits. It is in the consciousness that the change has to come. So when the change happens in the individual consciousness, then no amount of preaching or evangelism from other religions will be able to shake you or throw you off your balance. Right? You will be able to stand on your own feet because you are rooted in your own philosophy. You understand your philosophy, and therefore, you'll be able to respond to them with confidence. Right? So it is my exposure to, for example, the Bhagavad Gita and its scriptures. Today, I'm not afraid of debating with anybody of any other religion. We can have debates, any number of debates with the greatest scholars of any religion, and we'll be able to stand our ground and explain a point of view without feeling apologetic, without feeling nervous, without feeling defeatist in our mindset, because we know that what our scriptures are offering is very, very rational, very deep, and it can be explained, without having to resort to mumbo jumbo or to magic or miracles or mantras or superficial stuff. So this is what I want listeners to appreciate, that if we want Hindu society to become strong to counter these demographic or conversion threats, then being rooted in your spirituality, in your philosophy, in your scriptures is very, very important.
Do
So
you,
these are some of the threats that I want our listeners to recognize.
right? Do you feel our openness for discovery is our threat?
Okay. So this, what you're calling is openness, Meghaji, is actually a kind of misunderstood liberalism, right? The common Hindu thinks that the Hindu scriptures have no rules and regulations. Right? There is no Hindu scripture that asks me to go to the temple on every Sunday like a Christian goes to the church, or a Muslim goes to do namaz 5 times a day, or to the mosque on Fridays. But this is a wrong understanding, right? It's only because of ignorance of our scriptures that we have come to this so-called thinking that says that I can do anything that I want as a Hindu, and nobody can impose any rules or regulations on me. This is an incorrect understanding. The Dharma Shastras are very, very clear, they're very precise about what makes you a Hindu, right? And what Hindu lifestyle is. From the time that you wake up till you fall asleep, the Dharma Shastras have given us a very precise dinacharya. In fact, a very regulated lifestyle has been prescribed to us. And in fact, what happens when you don't follow that, the dosha that follows, the papa that follows, the karma that follows, has also been told to us. So there are very clear injunctions from the Shastras as to, if you are a Hindu and if you claim to be a Hindu, then there is a basic minimum, right, that you are expected to follow. It cannot be that you don't have a lifestyle at all and you call yourself as a cultural Hindu, but I'm not a religious. So this misunderstanding has to go, right? But at the same time, we have to recognize that the modern generation, what I have seen in my social circles, for example, because as I said, I come from a classical conservative background. There are many of these youngsters who are put off by a lot of rituals, orthodoxy, or whatever conventionally the word that was used. And one, because the logic behind those rituals and that lifestyle has not been explained to them by their parents. The parents themselves are ignorant. So the parents themselves are products of the same education system that we are talking about. And therefore, they don't have the tools to communicate this to the younger generation. And they simply say, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. And therefore, this is where the rebellion comes from, right? And so, this whole narrative has been built up that Hinduism is very liberal and therefore you don't have to do anything. And therefore, we have to, as I said, find again a middle path where you create a light version of Hinduism, right? Which is not very heavy on rituals for the younger generation, which is, let's say, not into rituals, but which still gives them the basic lifestyle that they have to follow. If I have to claim to be a Hindu, then this is the basic lifestyle that I have to follow, and which then gives me the cultural, consciousness to remain a Hindu and to follow that lifestyle. So we need to simplify this process and create a light version of Hinduism for the younger generation, so that the liberalism does not become a threat to us, right? And we live the values that we are trying to protect and defend in the public space.
Okay, Pramodji. So I have two big questions, but the first thing you just mentioned something called as light version of Hinduism.
Right.
What did you mean by that?
For example, let's say, if there is a Hindu, he's, publicly, as I said, he's an activist, right? He's
Right.
been defending the wrong, he's defending against the wrong narratives of Hinduism in the public. But in his personal life, there is nothing, let's say from morning to evening, there is nothing that he does which, say, justifies where he realizes or discovers the value of being a Hindu. Right? So, let's say the religious leadership should come together and say that these are the basic things that I can do as a Hindu. Right? Let's say a chanting at home every morning, if not anything else. When you wake up, you take a bath, at least light a lamp in your puja room and do a systematic chanting. You bring in Sanskrit through that chanting, right, into your homes. Your children listen to that chanting every day. That in itself creates samskaras in them. In fact, many of the samskaras that I developed, or this interest in spirituality that I developed, is because every day I saw my mother lighting this lamp and chanting these stotras in Sanskrit and singing the arati in Marathi that she would sing. And not a day would pass, even when she was sick. And she was working. She was a working woman. She would go to office at 9 o'clock, but she would get up in the morning and she would do these rituals. She would do this chanting, and she would involve us in the whole process. She would ask us to go and pluck flowers for the puja, and then she would involve us in the puja and make us do the chanting. And this is the memory that has stayed with me throughout my life, even after my mother has passed away. Almost there is not a day passes when the memories of that time that I've spent with her doing these rituals, that I have forgotten. So this is the atmosphere that we need to create at home, that every Hindu needs to create at home. And this is the basic light version of Hinduism that we should give to our children, so that they grow up with these samskaras, with the basic values, and read to them at least the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, right? At night. So I make it a point to read to my 10-year-old child. I've started reading the Ramayana for him when he was about 7 or 8 years old. It was in fact late. It should have started earlier. But when I saw that his school was not doing it, I felt that this gap has to be filled. So whether the school teaches Hinduism or not, I make it a point to ensure that the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, the epics and the stories are taught to him. So today he's developed an interest, and he's been reading history books, he's been reading the life of Shivaji Maharaj, etc. So this is the basic light version of Hinduism that I'm saying, where it is not heavy on orthodoxy or rituals or puts them off, or let's say disturbs they feel that it is an interference to their modern lifestyle. But at least the basic foundation and the basic values that they will have. We have to start from there, because we have to recognize that in our society, in Hindu society today, it is only about, say, 5 to 10% of Hindus who are really awakened, religiously, spiritually awakened, who are really leading the Hindu lifestyle and who are also being activists. The remaining 85% to 90% is completely ignorant at the mass level. If you look at it, the culture of the masses has become very, very diluted, especially in the state where I'm living, in Tamil Nadu. If you see, right, the public culture that you see is completely divorced from our foundational values, and therefore bringing back these basics is very, very important. So this is what I call the light version of Hinduism.
Beautifully explained. Do you think knowing the answer to the why, which is why to Lampatia or why should I do the chanting? I've heard a lot of youth asking the answers to why, but I've also seen a lot of parents failing to be able to answer the why, and hence are the kids rebellious towards those activities. Um,
Okay,
can we provide some tools to our viewers and listeners for those parents that don't know the answer to why?
absolutely. Right. So there are again two aspects to this, Meghaji. There are one set of parents who are not equipped with this knowledge. So when the child asks me why do I have to do this ritual? Right? They are unable to explain, and therefore it is leading to that rebellion. So for such parents, there is a lot of material that is available today on the social media, on YouTube channels, right? Simple things which they can listen to, right, or talks, podcasts like this, which will help them to answer these questions, and they will have to essentially discover the answers to those questions. They will have to convince themselves if they have to convince the younger generation. But in doing so, in the last 2 decades, I have found that we have gone to another extreme, in the sense that we're trying to find scientific explanations from a modern science perspective to each and every ritual, to each and every symbolic act that we are doing. I feel even that is not correct, because it takes us away. We are trying to bridge two systems which are divorced with each other. We're constantly trying to validate Hinduism from the perspective of modern science. It does not have to be. Culturally, there are certain practices which have been bequeathed to us by our ancestors, which are self explanatory. They're very beautiful. And just for living the beauty of human life, they enhance and enrich human life with the beautiful aspects, social, cultural aspects that these religions bring into our life. We don't have to always find, let's say, very quirky or extreme scientific explanations and try and explain that to the children. We just need to tell them that this is what makes your life beautiful. This is what adds meaning to your life. This is what adds color to our lives. Look at our festivals, for example. Right? Which other civilization, which other culture has such colorful festivals, right? Such beautiful festivals like Diwali or Holi, or each of those festivals today is becoming a global phenomenon. You have other countries declaring holidays for Diwali. Australia declared, a Hindu Heritage Month this year, looking at the kind of value that Diwali adds to their culture. So these are like self-sufficient in themselves. These are self-explanatory in themselves, and parents have to point that out. That without these things, your human life would be empty. They would be devoid of meaning, right? You have societies, for example, in UK, others where they are appointing ministries for loneliness. Why? Because these cultural aspects have been taken away, they have been deracinated, and therefore it is leading to so many emotional, social, and psychological problems. And all we have to do is put this fact in front of the children and say that this is what our culture has given us, and this is what makes human life so beautiful to live. And therefore, these have to be celebrated. You don't have to always find the why of it, right? Just for the joy of it, we have to do it.
Makes sense. So completely makes sense. Can we just do a session on dinacharya? What is a perfect dinacharya according to Hindutva and Sanatan Dharma? I think
Sure.
that would be a great tool for our viewers to directly go to and say, you know what, look at Pramodji's podcast. Here it is. Let's follow this. If nothing, that's
Let's
the
do that.
basic that they can follow.
Absolutely. And it will involve so many aspects like health and holistic living, right? Because this dinacharya was always connected to Ayurveda also. The way you eat, the way the food is served, the order in which you eat the food every day. And you link it to, you do a prayer before eating the food, right? So there is religion in it, there is spirituality in it, there is philosophy in it, there is also medicine and health and lifestyle in it. So, if we go into the dinacharya, that would be wonderful. We're going to put a kind of a manual of living and lifestyle in front of our younger generations too.
And I don't think there is enough of that available, or even if it's available, there is so much in different ways with so much
Right.
diversity. I don't think scriptures are being considered while discussing how a day should be within Sanatan Dharma. I think that's a very new concept we would be bringing.
Absolutely. You've hit the bull's eye with that, Meghaji. In fact, this is a problem that you've seen many aspects of Hindu society and civilization. That on one side you have scholarly material that is available. A lot of scholarship is there, and a lot of scholarly content is there. Right? The solutions to our problems are already there. But what has happened is this is not percolated down into the public space, into the public mind, because the people to do that, right? The agents to communicate this knowledge in a simplified way, in a popular way, in an appealing way to the younger generations. That is where the gap is. So podcasts like this, where you said if you discuss the dinacharya part, etc., will be the right solution for it because we'll be doing this filtering down, right? The simplifying part of it. We'll be depending on scholars who have already given us the solutions and the framework is there. We just need to simplify it and present it to the common audience, the lay audience, so that they can lap it up and internalize it in their everyday lives.
And I think by that, they will also understand what is the light version of Hinduism. A lot of youth
Correct.
is going to connect to this. I'm pretty sure of that.
Right.
Uh,
Wonderful.
my last question for our podcast, as much as I hate to let you go, that is, what is importance of Artha, which is the economic and financial literacy and independence, for protecting Hindu Dharma?
Absolutely. So, you have this famous encyclopedia treatise called the Arthashastra, written by the Chanakya, also called Kautilya. And in his Niti Sutras, he comes up with this very famous dictum, with this very famous statement, where he says, Dharmasya moolam arthaha, that the foundation for dharma is in artha. That dharma in a society cannot be protected or practiced if that society is not strong in artha, meaning that if it is not financially strong, if a society is not economically strong, then the framework for living or protecting dharma is not there, and dharma will collapse in a society which is financially, economically weak. So this is applicable to individuals also. Only when we are financially strong and independent that we will be able to protect our dharma. In fact, to practice dharma, like Vivekananda used to say, you cannot preach Hindu philosophy to a hungry man. If he is hungry, then his hunger has to be satisfied first before he becomes even eligible or capable of understanding our philosophy. So, from the economic devastation which the British caused during the colonial period, we have come a long way today. We have become the fifth largest economy, and we are on the way to becoming the third largest economy in the next few years. and this is the way to go. And you see this that right from 1992, when liberalization happened, economic liberalization happened in India, you also see a very fast revival of Hinduism happening. So in 1992 was also, the December 6th event that would happen, and I would say it was not, just a coincidence that as you become economically stronger, Hindu society is also becoming confident of reclaiming its Hindu identity, and it is also having the strength and the support system required to regain that Hindu identity. So this is something that all our young listeners should always keep in mind, that they have to give a lot of importance to safeguarding their own financial strength, their family's financial strength. They should become financially literate, and they should encourage all their family members to become financially literate. And as they become financially stronger, a part of that has to be channeled into dharmic activities. I think this is where one of the greatest weaknesses of Hinduism lies today. That while other religions have a systematic mechanism for charity today, right? Uh, uh, the Muslims, for example, have what is called zakat, where systematically they donate to their religious charities and their activities. The Christians donate to the church. So this charity is not happening systematically in Hindu society, especially for dharmic activity. This consciousness has to be brought back to them. That traditionally our Shastra said that 1/10 of your income should go to dharmic activities. If not 1/10, at least whatever is possible for you as you become financially stronger. Young entrepreneurs, Hindu entrepreneurs, etc., should keep this in mind. Channel it back into activities that will make our society stronger, which will make Hinduism stronger. You could start balavihars, you could start schools where Hinduism is taught, or you could invest in enterprises which are, or in NGOs or in research institutes or in scholars who are doing this activism, who are protecting Hinduism from wrong narratives. So this is what our young people should understand, that this financial strength is very, very important. And as Bharat becomes economically stronger, you will see that Hindu consciousness will also become stronger. Both are closely linked to each other; they're directly proportional to each other.
It just reminded me of a very good topic or a point that you had brought up was the weak link. The reason why the conversions are increasing or why people are going on the other side was, isn't this one of the strongest weaker link which is allowing others to come
Correct.
into our dharma and interfere with the current practices that we are trying to get into?
Yes, very true. And it is really very painful sometimes to see our activists, coming up on social media appealing for, there are so many critical projects, right, which are lacking funding today, right, despite there being so many Hindu billionaires today around the world. And these billionaires are going in for, funding, for example, chairs in foreign universities. They're giving millions of dollars for setting up chairs in foreign universities, while these scholars, these traditional scholars here, are not getting the funding that they require, are not getting the recognition that they require, are not getting the support system that they require. So therefore, this gap has to be filled, and it can happen only through proper, engaging them in a dialogue, giving them the awareness of what can be done, and convincing them that this is the right thing.
Very true. Very, very well said, Pramodji. Um, I know I said this was my last question. I want you all viewers and listeners to know Pramodji has been brutally honest and extensively shared his true wisdom, courage, and his dharmic love towards Bharat and its Bharatiya Loktantra, which is towards Sanatan Dharma. I would request you all to A, watch it, B, continue giving us your comments and feedbacks on what you thought about this podcast and what is that one thing that moved and inspired you that you are going to act and accept within your lifetimes going forward. Pramodji, thank you again for this impactful time of yours this morning. I am sure you and I are doing our share of dharma to spread awareness about our Sanatan Dharma going ahead. We will continue our chats like I have gotten a commitment from you. I have a lot of questions from you. Your NEP knowledge, your NCERT knowledge, your Dinacharya knowledge. I am going to get as much as I can from you because I'm sure the audience and viewers are going to take a lot from this while we get your time on your availability. But thank you again.
Thank you, Meghaji. It was wonderful talking to you, and I look forward to many more such interactions. And as you said, we will do this squirrel's contribution, as the Ramayana says, like the tiny squirrel that added its pebbles to the building of the Ramasetu. Right? We will build this Ramasetu, this bridge to Hindu consciousness in the future. Thank you again. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste. Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri.